It isn't really surprising that we all feel so much stress and anxiety about our collective futures at this moment. I can't really recall a time in my life when we witnessed so many things happening simultaneously throughout the world, whether that's war, megadroughts, inflation, recession, political upheaval, fires, and the list goes on and on. What we're really collectively going through right now seems to be yet another moment where we're experiencing change, a tectonic shift under our feet, if you will. Can you feel it? If we haven't met before, my name is Chris, and on this channel we discuss emergency preparedness, aka prepping. Now, before we jump into this video, I do want to share something. We have a Costco membership, and we get their monthly magazine. I'm sure you probably heard of Costco. It's a big chain store throughout the United States and around the world for that matter. And in their magazine that we just received, I actually threw it away, so I'll post a link to the PDF here in the video so you can see it. And it's interesting this month because they have a whole section dedicated to emergency preparedness with the title, Weather the Storm. And I have a feeling that we'll increasingly see preparedness become more and more mainstream as people really realize how fragile our systems are that we rely upon every day. You guys, if you're watching this video and you follow my channel, you're ahead of the curve. So I recently asked on the community tab of my YouTube channel whether you thought that things would return to normal, and whatever that is. A whopping 91% of you answered no, we're in the early stages of collapse, no going back. And hey, maybe we are, and honestly only time will tell, but if I was a betting man, yeah. In some ways, the world has always been in a state of flux, and we just haven't really noticed because there haven't been this amount of massive tectonic shifts in most of our lifetimes. Now, if you were to ask the prepper that question, you can probably anticipate on which side of the coin their answer will be. Still, I was a little shocked by just how overwhelmingly in one direction the results were. In my opinion, words like normal and traditional, they're just comfort words that we use to soothe ourselves when we face change. And prepping is applying a strategy to allow one to move through that change confidently. In the last several decades, we have lived in relative global peace despite a couple of wars in which we were engaged. And life as we knew it was pretty much consistent for many. Income and jobs weren't exactly on a rocket's trajectory, but there was work and you could make a living. You could afford gas, rent, and utilities, and maybe you were even able to make a few extra investments or bolster a retirement account a little bit. And we had political differences, and we figured out how to compromise and move forward. A salesman friend of mine recently told me that a good deal is the one in which both parties feels like they got something and they gave a little in the deal. And that may have been true in the past, but today it really seems to be all or nothing for most people. We're seeing scorched earth, zero-sum game politics in which the goal is not to really advance the well-being of the constituents that these politicians represent, but rather to inflict as much harm on their opponent as possible. And to me, that's really mind-blowing. And to really top it all off, it can be disheartening when people dehumanize others with opposing views. And maybe I was naive when I was growing up by having a rosy view of the world, but I just don't recall the animosity and vitriol in our national discourse, which has really grown to become the norm. The climate, it's at its extremes, but it was pretty stable overall. And we weren't seeing so many records being shattered. We weren't seeing lakes and reservoirs drying up in some places and once-in-a-lifetime floods in other areas. We have lived in what's considered a Goldilocks era of temperatures really being just right overall, and weather having a few but not too many extremes. And despite the peace, the relative prosperity, the willingness to find common ground, and moderate weather, we are in a different place right now. Perhaps an inflection point in the human historical record. And I'm really baffled by people who say everything is the same. Everything, there's nothing wrong. Everything is normal. There's nothing here to see. I'm equally confused by people who want to spend every waking moment debating the cause and assigning blame. Look, my personality is such that when presented with problems, I always try to seek a solution. And I guess that's one of the main reasons that I've been attracted to the preparedness community, aka prepping. Some people, they call this point late stage capitalism. Others call it the failure of an effort to globalize our processes. Others, they call it business as usual, with nothing out of the ordinary to see here. Whatever one calls it, one really has to wonder if we will ever return to a sense of stability and reasonableness. And I'm just being honest, but I think those days are behind us. Our sense of peace and calm, it's really been stripped away in the last few years, and it's really left many of us uncertain, maybe even a bit jaded. And I find some of my own abundant optimism really slipping away at times. This is a challenge that I have personally faced lately. I've had to be careful not allowing myself to focus on the negative and to always go in that direction. I've really had to find myself pulling back and to keep perspective. And I guess the best way to express this is kind of like being in a dream where you're falling, and then you suddenly wake up and it jolts you awake in your bed. And it just feels like, and again, using the word feel here, it feels like we're in a sense of free fall that we're all currently experiencing. But the downside is really appear to be ending. There's no waking up from this reality simply because we're living in it and not dreaming. But is this unique to us, or is this just another page in our human history? The thing is history is full of times when massive change happened, whether that's wars, famines, dust bowls, depressions, and much more have forever changed our world in one historical moment at a time. And it's more extreme than we're really used to, but it's not entirely out of the realm of human history. And here's the thing, while I don't want to thrive on or even get excited to see times of turmoil or bad things happening, I can't really help but to acknowledge that we're at this time where it's increasingly becoming the norm. We're in a moment where quite literally anything could happen. A simple miscommunication between nuclear superpowers could lead to utter annihilation of our species. And that's a difficult thing to really resolve in your mind. History is full of examples of sudden events changing the course of humanity. So it begs the question, are we in a pivotal moment? I think we are, and it really appears to be so based on the facts. We are on the cusp of such epic change that it's entirely normal to feel the anxiety, the stress, and overwhelming uncertainty of it all. Is that what you're feeling? Because I sure am. For many of us, we're experiencing this feeling, something that's it feels tangible, that we can all sense, that really makes us uncomfortable. And that can be a feeling so strong that it incapacitates us, it stresses us to the point where we are no longer effective, or it motivates us to get involved or underscore our need to prepare to endure this uncertain future that we're facing. And it's that last one that I think serves us best, even though we can't really help but feel all of those options. When I feel the ground personally moving underneath me, so to speak, I am encouraged and motivated to take action and prepare. Now, I don't want to stoke anxiety or fear on this channel, as there's plenty of that out there already. Instead, I think it's wise to acknowledge that we're going through this and that we act upon what we feel in a positive and productive way. So, of course, the question comes up, and as I pointed out, I focus on what I can practically do. The question obviously comes up, what can we practically do when feeling this uncertain? Here's a few tips. First, acknowledge that times are changing and we don't know when this roller coaster will ever settle again. Second, build a plan to endure both the current hills and tight turns and the ones that will likely occur in the coming future. I would encourage you to outline a prepping plan and to implement it. Understand that a bit of work now goes a long way later and will change your life currently. If you take steps now to become a little more self-sufficient, a little more independent, a little more prepared for when the storm strikes and the power goes out, you will have spent time building stability in your future, regardless of whether the calamity is just an earthquake, a wildfire, civil unrest, or just a week-long power outage. If you have prepared for a few months' worth of food for a natural disaster that may strike, and you suffer a sudden massive medical expense or loss of income during a recession, how much better off will you be? If you can get some people in your community, whether that's in your church or work, to prepare or even form a co-op or bartering network with you, how much better off will you be when large, small, or even personal disasters strike? And the answer is simple. You will be much better off. You will be more prepared than most people. You would be better positioned to pivot and to make decisions rather than just being a victim. And the thing is, prepping, it puts a little bit of control over your own destiny back in your hands. A little at a time, you're really able to shore up your own walls, your own future. The key is to do something instead of just sitting around and worrying. I would encourage you to get busy, develop or use a plan, and start checking the boxes on that plan. Get busy doing, and you will find that the stress and anxiety of uncertainty replace with confidence and calmness, I can assure you. Prepping, it really puts a few inches between you and the cliff's edge. And to use my earlier analogy of the roller coaster, prepping, it helps you to understand the bends of the track ahead so that you're less in shock when they actually do happen. The ride, it will eventually end for us all one day, regardless of what we do, but that's not a reason to do nothing. On the contrary, it's a very reason to do everything that you can right now. I'll leave you with two phrases that I learned from my studies in Stoicism. The first is memento mori, which basically means remember death. It comes for us all one day, but that phrase is always usually coupled with memento vivere, remember to live. The world can get gloomier and gloomier, I know that. It can feel oppressive, and it can oppress us. The world can even make it hard for us to remember to breathe. Through all things, remember, as the Stoics said, remember to live. Remember why you prepare. Keep focused on working your plan methodically to a comfortable spot. Sure, pray, but remember that you have to spend the time now to build a stable future for yourself after disaster strikes. And at some point, disaster will inevitably strike. And that's just part of being alive. How you deal with the calamities that you face and how prepared you are for them, well, that's entirely up to you today. So feel it all, but also put those feelings into perspective. Let them motivate you and drive you forward through the action of living and preparing. As always, stay safe out there.